Hey, welcome back. It's the Scaling Secrets podcast from Otter PR, and Robert Burgess is here from Your Home TV. And we're going to be talking about so many different things. We're going to be talking about how to possibly transition your leadership team from an entrepreneurial startup to a scalable corporate organization, and how to scale your business for long term growth by focusing on the customer to finally implement some of these things that maybe you've heard or need to take more seriously or get dialed in, act ethically and deliver a good experience and everything that comes along with that. So Robert Burgess, who is the marketing and strategic planning guru behind the scenes, he develops go-to market strategies. He launches profitable demand generation programs. He's worked with Fortune 100 companies. We're going to dive into Robert's expertise and find out what we need to know. So Robert, glad to be speaking with you.
Great. Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And so we threw out a bunch of things there, right? We hyped you up, but in your own words, what is your current focus and passion?
Well, my passion has always been about the customer and the customer experience. And what I mean by that is that to me, that's the universe. That's the central focal point of any business growing and being very successful long term. And just to kind of give a running start at that, kind of the first act of my career, I was an economic analyst focusing on customer behavior. And I will use the term customer in this case because it's both consumer and business. So, your customer is your customer, depending on who it is, but this works in both universes. But I really had a passion for that, and I jumped into marketing and strategic planning after a few years because I wanted to be able to implement some of the things that I had learned from talking to the customer, working with the customer, modeling customer behavior, things like that. What's really important to them, and how does this really apply to a business that really wants to grow and kind of move to that next stage?
And give us an idea of these sorts of businesses that you work with. Like, can you give us an example of some of this kind of customer train of thought? Like, what sort of businesses have you like improved the customer experience on?
Well, I mean, and it's funny, like I said, I talked first act. Second act, I was very lucky to spend several years in the advertising agency realm, kind of honing my chops. So having a chance to work in a lot of different industries, whether it's industrial, restaurant, retail, transportation, utilities, things like that. So really got a chance to look at it from a lot of different people's viewpoint, or look it through their lens to understand. And then the last part of that third act of my career, I spent several years in the corporate side working. Did start off in telecommunications and then working specialty retail and consumer business as well as healthcare. And then the last few years have been really into that consulting, helping companies establish this, maybe stepping in as a fractional head of marketing to the smaller companies that don't have kind of that C-suite experience to really help them move. So I my what I believe that I've been really lucky at is that I've had a chance to see dozens and dozens and dozens of different industries. And so there are some threads that go through all of them. And obviously there are some subtle differences that each you have to apply to your circumstance to be able to have that relationship with the customer.
So you've been all over the map. And so tell us about some of these threads. Like, what do you see that is really needed these days as far as the customer experience, and what are these companies missing out on?
Well, and again, I'm gonna talk in very general terms. So, everybody knows kind of the impacts to customer service and everything that COVID created. And if you're old enough to remember, you remember exactly what happened, or you lived through exactly what happened during the crash of '08, and how that has a tendency to people pull back benefits and things to customers that most of the time don't come back. But putting that aside, the biggest challenge in my mind is that as a company grows, they want to grow, become bigger, kind of move, to those next stages, is that they have a tendency to forget about the customer and start focusing more on the operational aspect and the infrastructure aspect of the organization, which is very important, but you can't lose one to have the other. Now, so because and at the end of the day, let's think about it in terms of just in brass tacks, what does it take to grow a company? Well, you can do it a few different ways. It's, you're increasing your customer base, you're selling customers more, um, at this point, or you're creating a higher level of retention or loyalty. So, you're getting more total lifetime value out of that customer. Those are really the three primary ways you grow your business. And so how do you continue to do those and make sure that you are growing that customer experience and not shrinking it?
Yeah, and I think it's really important because you see, all, like you said, with COVID and everything, you see these companies that are in sort of a death spiral, and it seems like they make really not well thought out decisions, right? They increase prices, they cut costs for things that maybe shouldn't be cut. They're not thinking more creatively, strategically, like you're telling us to do. And I know you said you wanted to keep it general, but can you like indulge us a little bit and jump into like a specific story of some kind? Like I know like we can't apply it to every kind of business, but has there been something in your experience where you just like jumped into one of these specific companies and like you really like kind of did the right thing?
Well, and I'll take you back since it's been several years ago, and so it doesn't matter. I was in the boating industry, and I won't bring up the specific company, but boating and boating supply industry, and was there, for a few years. But once I'd gotten there, about 6 months in, the CEO called me in his office, and with my boss and stuff like that. He said, "Well, you've been here 6 months. What are your impressions?" And it's like, this is a great company. People are wonderful, stuff like that. The challenge here is that you've got a whole building full of people that are very passionate about boating, and they're not passionate about boaters. And so they loved the sport, they loved what they did, but they didn't necessarily translate that on how they would feel if they were on the customer end of things, and how do you focus on that? And so, um, the important piece here is, how do you get people to do that? And there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I'm going to be talking about how do you learn, know your customer. And I always tell people that everybody in the building, from the receptionist to the CEO and everybody in between, should have their elevator speech of who their customers are. Who is their customer? What are their customer segments? What's important to them? Why do they think about this, or why do they do it that way? And the reason why you want to have that is, now you have a situation where everybody can come together and talk about a unified topic to be able to provide best benefit for the company, best benefit for the customer, best benefit for the company. So the debate isn't who, the debate isn't how, it's what do they need, what do we do for them. And for me, bringing this together and creating it, this was, creating a customer segmentation process where you're talking about people's name, giving people names, giving them personalities, making them saying, "Oh, that's my next door neighbor," or "That's the guy down the street," or this, making it personal to them. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about that in those ways. Well, what would benefit this person? Well, this person really cares about X, therefore we should do this. Or this person or this group really uses this type of media in terms of all the different ways you can contact them. So this is how we need to be talking to them. And these are things that are important to them. So it really kind of, the debate becomes how and not who and what at this point. And that unifying process will bring the company together, the departments together, even the ones that have a natural tendency to be frictional with each other. It'll bring them together because you're looking at the ball from the same direction, and you're talking about the same person. And now you're debating strategy and not nomenclature. So
I like this idea. Yeah.
and I've done that a couple of times. I've picked out the boating industry. I've also done it in the specialty hardware industry, but literally, and even popping over into that, when you're talking about companies that will compete with Lowe's and Home Depot, but have to be more specialized in what they're doing, is, what if I'm talking to, and I will use one in the home improvement industry, gave them names. One segment was called Pam, predominantly female customer, and you would tell everything. You basically said, okay, this is who they are, this is their experience, this is their knowledge, this is what they think, this is important to them, this is how they use media, all this other stuff, to the point where I've given it a name, and now everybody will talk about Pam, not this customer group or whatever, but what do we provide Pam? And that's not just from an advertising standpoint, but it's merchandising. It's what's the definition of customer service to this person versus another segment. So now all of a sudden everybody's kind of bringing together in one group. This is how we treat the customer end to end. This customer end to end to maximize our relationship with them. And so that relationship, maximize that relationship, will ultimately maximize lifetime value with that customer.
I love this. It's a great idea, right? To know who your customer is or to know about these segments, give them an actual name, and
Mhm.
know about what they think, how they act, what's important to them, what media they consume, and to have this kind of elevator speech, so
Right.
that elevator pitch, so that way we can kind of just really easily focus on not what your company does or not on the product, but on the person and like how do you help them. And is there some kind of way where people might go wrong with this? Like, do they maybe like create too many of them or don't think it through? Or like, where is the pitfall in this process?
The pit well, there's a handful, but one of the more important pitfalls is that you're trying to create a standardized process that other people are using and not coming in and deciding or figuring out how this fits you, what's important to you. So, um, like with the segmentation of the customer base, a lot of times you're trying to segment the whole industry and not just my customers. So you know all the segments that are out there. And then it's understanding that based on your business model, who do you really service best or what's going to be the most profitable for you to service? And this is a real important topic because everybody wants to sell everybody everything all the time. And um, it's funny, Jim Cramer, if you follow, if you follow investing, Jim Cramer was talking about the retail industry is if you're trying to create a customer or a customer profile, then you have no customer profile because they're coming from all sorts of walks of life. So if you're segmenting this and really targeting looking at this industry, home improvement, whatever you call it, these are the segments that I've created that appear to be out there. And these are the segments that realistically that we sell to really well and that we can service really well. These over here we may not want to go after. And so therefore let's pull resources here to focus on maximizing our relationship with the customer that is the best connection or the best relationship for us. And so that's the biggest pitfall is trying to service everybody all the time and not picking and choosing who you go with. The other pitfall that's really important here is how do we talk about this. It's like, well, okay, what are you doing? You're talking about psychographics, demographics, uh, market research, behavioral modeling, all this other quantitative and qualitative types of stuff. Okay, what does it mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything unless you can build a network, a set of linkages to identify what a customer service change in metric means ultimately to a revenue source. And this isn't going to be perfect, but you could be able to tie it. I'll use Net Promoter Score, which everyone at one time or another has probably used. And so someone came in and asked me, he goes, "Well, our Net Promoter Score is this. It's a number." I said, "Okay, what does that number mean?" "Well, compared to this company, it's this." What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything because, first of all, they're probably going to calculate it different than you calculated, and it's not going to be perfect. And the second is their relationship with the customer is different than your relationship with the customer. What you need to know is if your score is X, if you move that needle by a certain amount, how does that translate that linkage down the line, ultimately to an increase in sales revenue or profitability or EBITDA or whatever metric you want to put on it? And again, it's not perfect, but if you can go through and put that process together, then you know A, what you can invest, and B, you know what's important. Because if improving my net promoter score doesn't move the needle, do I really need to be paying attention to it? Right. So that's where
Right.
you've got to have that metric and you got to have that linkage that will turn it into this means this in terms of revenue growth. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be strongly directional for you to say, okay, I can afford to invest in this because now we're going to come back to the operational standpoint. Things go bad, or you're trying to maximize profitability, what do the first thing you go after? Budgets. Well, if you don't know what you can invest to get a great return on your investment, how do you know what you can afford to give up or adjust or even ask for in terms if you want an increase or whatever? So the money involved has to be tied to, if I'm spending a dollar, what's it getting me on the back end? And so those are the linkages that you have to create to be able to make sure, because the customer service and relationship with the customer are significantly different things. And I'll give you the example of Walmart versus, and we'll call it Bloomingdale's. In my part of the country, it had been Neiman Marcus back in the day, but a high end retailer, um, somebody that really focuses themselves as a discounter. The type of customer service that is expected from the customer at Walmart is significantly different than Blooming's. And you can't, you want to make sure that you're providing that right amount of service, whether it's customer service, it's value proposition, all of these other things. What you've got to be able to create that to fit your customer and what their expectations of your company is or your brand as it sits there. You can't give too little. You can't give too much, because one will confuse the customer on the top end. The other will create an angst or desire to find someone else that can better service their needs. And so, uh, and what does that mean? What does it mean to? I'll use another example, because I'll use McDonald's as an example, because McDonald's, most people don't like their food, and they're not the best burger in town by any stretch of the imagination. But they are undoubtedly one of the best marketing engines that restaurants have ever seen. And so way back when, they had these burgers that couldn't compete from a quality standpoint. And pricing was kind of competitive with everybody else. That really wasn't a factor. So what did they decide to do? Well, they put in a playground and they focused on the mother and said, you know what? Here's a Happy Meal. Here's a burger for you. You can sit down with your kids. Now we're talking the 70s, so think about that. think about that's a little bit different in terms of what the expectation of the parental dynamics are. But you can go get your kids a Happy Meal, let them play on the playground, and you can sit down for 30 minutes and eat a hamburger and relax while your kids are entertained. And that basically turned them into a juggernaut, because it's like all of a sudden, we don't serve hamburgers, we serve convenience and benefit to parents. So it's really understanding those dynamics and then what you need to do to provide them. And so that's the reason why you need to know, what's that customer attitude toward you, and what are their needs? What do they want? What's important to them, type of thing, to be able to do that. And then, as I said, measure it and then be able to make those decisions to maximize your profitability long term.
Very helpful. And I can tell you've thought a lot of this through and that you've seen many things. And recently my wife and I have had different conversations like this about the brand personality and then what the brand story then ends up being. Like, we have conversations about oh, well, Harley Davidson, their people are like this, or the McDonald's thing, how they kind of geared it towards moms and kids. And then Burger King was like, well, hey, that's for adults. And then now McDonald's kind of shifted from the bright colors to now it looks like a gray Starbucks, or how Macy's was high end and now they're kind of more like a Target. It's just interesting to think about how these things change over time, and not always good. Sometimes they make mistakes, or sometimes it's just interesting what it evolves into. And in this day and age, right, it's such a strange world. There's automation, there's AI, there's so much data. How has this whole customer-centric thinking changed since you started?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I don't know that it's changed significantly for the better. And the reason why is because um, things do automate, and there's not a lot of focus on that. So if you'll notice, especially with the advent of digital advertising and marketing and sales, is that it's targeted based on your habits, your performance. It's all behavioral, and they really don't take time to figure out what's that emotional background to that behavior. And so it hasn't gotten significantly worse, but I'm not sure that we've made enough progress. And that's where you see a lot of companies that quite frankly lose their audience. And I'll pick on J.C. Penney because J.C. Penney. I grew up in Dallas, so J.C. Penney was a staple company located there, and things like that. And people are looking at what's happened to it over the last 10 years, and how it's dropped off. But people don't forget now. Now I'm aging myself, but when I was a little kid, J.C. Penney, their direct competitor was Sears. They were a full blown department store with a service center. They sold tires, they sold gas. It was basically a direct competitor to Sears. And so, I believe in the 1980s, they said, you know what, we don't want to do this. We want to compete with Macy's. We want to be this specialty clothier, upscale retailer and stuff like that. So they pulled all of this out, no electronics division, no this, no that, no cars, nothing. We're going to do this and go directly to Macy's. Now, it eventually worked, but there was a 4 or 5 year period where that Penny's was probably going to go out of business. And if they did that in the 2000s, the way things moved so much faster, they would have. But back then, the slow burn gave them time to get footing and to change the customer's perception of now who they are versus who they were. And so, and this is a very big challenge. You only want to do that if you really are trying. It's a last ditch effort, or you're really committed to go that direction, because literally you're wiping the slate clean of all the goodwill you have up to that point, and say, okay, we're brand new, and this is what we offer, and now you got to start from ground zero again. And so that you don't the things that have changed, you don't see a lot of that happening anymore, because there's the runway for people to survive until they can do that is so short. So that's one benefit. Technology has improved to the point, and used AI, but even prior to AI, technology has improved the point where you can get more information on the customer and understand their behaviors better, and be able to analyze it and model it and react to it in a quick enough manner to be able to be focused. So the technology creates incremental knowledge, and that incremental knowledge is what's helped grow us over time. Uh, that being said, sometimes we see it and we still don't make the right decision. So that's the challenge with a lot of these companies, and so that's a good and a bad, right? And the fact with AI coming, it's even going to get that much better. You're almost going to know instantaneously who they are, what they do, or whatever, and you can see it in media today. I mean, the reason why I've spent a lot of time in the streaming space the last several years is that streaming advertising is so targeted now, because I know so much about you on the fly, that I can drop an ad very specific to you, that I couldn't years ago. It'd either be mass media or direct marketing, right? One way or the other. And now I've got the best of both worlds. I can deliver you a TV ad while you're watching Roku, watching, whatever TV station you want to watch. And so the technology gives us the opportunity, but we have to be able to step through the door and really understand who, what, where, and why, and what do we, what are we selling to these folks, and how are we communicating to them?
Wonderful. These are some helpful insights that we have the tools, we have the data, but it's also up to us to make decisions on them and to add in our own kind of emotional component. And I think that's a really helpful story that you told about just being careful about reinventing that brand's identity, right? Because like there's what you set out to do and the customers that found you, and when you start saying, well, I'm gonna detach from these customers in order to find some better ones, like that's kind of scary. Like imagine if like Jeep or Oldsmobile or someone just like tried to throw out all of that past baggage and like reinvent newly, like it'd be really weird, right? And it's not really clear how it would work. But so you're saying that we need to like look at this data and kind of take advantage of the super targeting that we can do these days. And like yesterday, me and my wife were out in San Francisco, and she kept pulling out her phone and being like, "Hey, look, this Facebook ad showed based on like my location. There's this store, this restaurant," and she kept on like noticing the ads, showing me the ads, and they were like pretty relevant. It's like, hey, finally arrived to kind of this era where it's like exactly what I want at that exact time. And so you mentioned about what you're doing now in the streaming, and we mentioned about how you have your home TV. So like, what has this all led to? What is your current company, and what has you so excited about it?
Well, and this is kind of it's an evolution. The parent company, Your Home Digital, we manage the streaming channel, which is a new concept. And the easy way to think about it is kind of a in between YouTube and a say a traditional like Pluto TV or Tubi or something like that. Mainly focused on small to mid-sized businesses and influencers and stuff that want to have their own unique programming. So it's not a revamp of programming. It's unique programming for people that are lifestyle. We've got, some folks, one folk that family that they've got their whole channel is nothing but living on their yacht and then going around going around Florida and the Keys and stuff like that, living that lifestyle. Others are an advice show. There's sports shows on their health pro shows. Main business partner is Kathy Ireland. And so a lot of her programming is up there because she's certainly a business mogul after all these years and quite a huge influencer in her business. So got into that, and I jumped into it because I had gotten into the streaming advertising piece of it because I love the ability to target that, to target a customer with an ad and things like that, and give the opportunity to businesses that normally could not afford or it made business sense for them to do that type of advertising. And not that I've worked with them, but I'll go back to the boating industry. At the time I was there, the boating industry, only about 10% of the households in the country had boats. They were boaters of some sort. And the majority of those were the little small dinghies and stuff like that. So they weren't really traditional boaters. So it's a very small percentage. That being said, it was very, very difficult to advertise in a mass media format because the audience as a percentage wasn't there. You couldn't get the return on investment because it's a small enough set of eyes that would have an interest in it. Well, today you can deliver those types of ads directly to people that own boats because that information is out there, it. So I can, just like you walking around San Francisco, I can identify, okay, you have a boat and this is the type of boat you have. Therefore, you are part of this segment. I'm going to give you this ad and I'm going to drive you here. And by the way, you're mainly an online shopper, so we're going to drive you online versus pushing you to the store, that type of thing. So we know enough where this is like instantaneous almost, and we can deliver those ads. And it's an interesting genre and growing revenue because the one interesting thing about it streaming is that streaming has now surpassed cable television in terms of total viewership. So it has now blown past traditional media and TV and will only continue to grow bigger. Because if you think about it, for those that have cable TV coming into their house or things like that, if you'll notice, that's all delivered from your Wi-Fi spot anyway. So it's really all technically streaming by definition anymore. So think about all those great commercials you're being delivered now that, if you think about it, are pretty unique. They're not perfect, but they're pretty unique. And I'll joke. A few years ago, I had a client in the educational space, Britannica, and a hearing aids space customer and things like that. So we were getting hearing aids ads and learning platform ads like ABC Mouse and stuff like that show on TV. My wife asked me, "Why are we getting those?" Well, why am I? Who are my two biggest clients? Well, these guys. And so, what am I spending most of my time doing on the computer, doing search and research and things like that? Okay, I understand. So they've identified me, and instead of they identified me thinking that I have a big interest in children's education space, and so they're delivering me those ads. So those are the things that are really pretty cool that you can actually laser focus in. Now, the flip side of that coin, because everybody's thinking this, is Orwell was right. 1984 is here. They all they all know about everything, and I'm going to deliver ads specifically to all those things I know. But if it makes your shopping experience better and it makes your relationship with that company better, then that is the perfect thing to do. So now, one thing I will backtrack on, you're talking about companies knowing their lane and staying in it and stuff like that. that still is very important. In other words, again, you don't want Walmart's not going to flip the script and say we're going to be a high end specialty retailer and we're only going to carry these top end brands and things like that because that's not their audience. That's not what they made their coin on. So they're not going to do that. So it's an old. I joke the great philosopher out of the 1970s, Dirty Harry, said, "Man's got to know his limitations." So where do you fit? Where as a company do you fit? You want to grow. Where do you fit and where are your next steps, knowing that your reputation, your brand, your knowledge, everything is right here. What's your next step to grow that fits, that keeps that narrative going so you don't have to reinvent yourself.
You've really brought to light a lot of the ways we can go wrong, right? And how we need to have like this deep thought and use our imagination in a lot of ways and say like, hey, here's some kind of proven marketing concepts and some branding stuff, and here's how we need to really think all these things through and like make these better decisions, right? And don't do things out of panic or just because like you hired some marketing team to like do something fresh and new. Like do what actually makes sense, what grows and scales your business. And so how can someone find out more about what you have going on with there's Your Home Digital and then you as a person? What sort of person would you like to reach out to you?
Well, I mean, any small to medium sized business that's growing that wants to take it to the next step, the next level, that's kind of what last few years is what I really like to focus on. Staying away from the Fortune 10 bureaucracy, so to speak. But yeah, businesses that are looking to grow and wanting to really take their company to the next level. And how do they do that? Those are the companies I like working with. And that's not just what's the best marketing, what's your brand, what's your product, stuff like that. But it's also, executives in training. I do a lot of mentoring to young executives in terms of, this person, we want them to be the vice president of marketing or operations. So they're a director now. Can you kind of help them grow into it? Sure. That's really a wonderful thing to do, and it helps a company really grow. In it, some of the other things are, really helping them understand who their customer is and how they need to address them and things like that. And then the last thing related to this, since we're talking about this industry, there's the big challenge for the smaller businesses. So you've got an entrepreneur who has now he or she has become very, very successful and doing really well, and the company's growing. So now it's time for you to transition, because being that hotshot entrepreneur is great, but now the company needs a more traditional CEO, a corporate executive that can lead from the rear, so to speak, or can create strategy and things like that. And that's a challenge because as an entrepreneur, you usually have your hands on everything, and so now you've got to be able to delegate and trust your people and your audience around you, and that's a transition. It's a growth for this executive. But one of the first things I've got to sit down with them, it's like, realistically, is this what you want? Because some people will tell me, it's like, no, I want to go hunt. This is what I do. I want to get there, hunt it. I don't want to sit there and have to manage it after the fact. I said, well, then your best option is to take it, sell your baby, chase your next white rabbit. Others say, no, I really want to take this and make it big. Okay, what can you do to become that corporate executive? And it becomes delegation, it becomes strategic planning versus tactical execution, those types of things. And it's helping someone achieve that if that's what they really want. The only hurdle is deep down inside, is that what you really want? Is that going to make you happy as a business leader to make this next step for yourself, or would you rather go out and create the next big thing?
Wonderful. This is very interesting to think about. And our recurring theme in our conversation is the peopling, right? Like you talk about the importance of the customer and the people on your team and get them into shape. And then you and balancing your skills and your wants. And are you a right fit for where your company is going? This is all just amazing to think about and ponder and maybe many people who are in trouble with their business, or the business is not where it needs to be going. Maybe they just haven't considered some of these ideas that you've been mentioning. And on LinkedIn, we know that your username is Robert Craig Burgess. And as far as some contact details or some next step website URLs, where should someone go?
Probably the easiest ones to go for is our Burgess at yhdmedia.com, yourhomedigitalmedia.com. That's the easiest one to get on. That's the parent company, and you can easily reach out to me. You can also get to me through, if you go to the Your Home TV site. You can easily kind of click through and message me that way. But reaching out that way is fine. I don't mind giving them a phone number if you want. You can easily call me. My number is
Sure. Hand it out. Yeah.
214-356-3706. Feel free to give me a call. Happy to chat. Anybody that has questions or stuff like that, I'm happy to spend an hour or two, for free, no charge. Let's chat, throw out some ideas and stuff like that, and see if that's helpful. If it comes to a longer assignment, then we can talk about that. But my goal is to help as many folks as I can kind of get their feet on the ground and get moving in the direction they want to go.
Wonderful. Well, you've seen some things, and now it is your time to give back and pass on what you've learned, right? And so we've been speaking with Robert Burgess from YHD Media, from Your Home TV. He dropped that phone number. Email address is rburgess@yhdmedia.com. And as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Robert, it's a podcast, and the sound bites are great. I think the kids love the TikToks and the reels. And so in the spirit of ending our conversation on a bang instead of a whimper, do you have any final parting words of advice? Do you have a fun quote or lesson that you think has really helped you that can really help us?
Well, let's see. I used up my Dirty Harry line, so let's see what else can I give.
Oh,
Well,
no.
honestly, the sound bite is if you believe in your customer and you're passionate about your customer, they will be passionate and believe in you. And and whatever that means based on your business, if you love the customer, they will love you back.
Wonderful. That's interesting to think about, and especially this idea of you figure this one thing out and it opens up many other doors for you. So let's think about loving our customer so that way they'll love us back, and then we can then figure out the minor details from there. Robert Burgess from Your Home TV and from yhdmedia.com. Wonderful speaking with you.
Rob, I appreciate your time. This was a great conversation, and I enjoy the invitation. Feel free to call anytime.